Joining us on the WGTK guest line today is John Mahshie. John is part of just a wonderful group up in Hendersonville, North Carolina, that I happened to read about recently, called Veterans Healing Farm. Veterans Healing Farm is a nonprofit community farm based and operated there in Hendersonville, and their mission is to aid veterans reintegrating into civilian life by growing produce, raising farm animals, and conducting seminars on holistic health and sustainability. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I read this article, John, and first of all, let me just tell you what a wonderful thing you're doing there in Hendersonville. A much-needed thing, because quite often, and I'm not a veteran, I'll say that. I did not serve in our military, but I appreciate you guys and the men and women who do serve in our military, past and present, and those who are contemplating joining in the future. It's just a special thing that you guys do for us, for our country. So I appreciate that very much. But I not having served myself, there are things that you guys experience that I can't understand, and I'm sure that's true for anyone. But the whole idea here, John, as I understand it, is, and I've read about this, I've talked with a lot of vets, I've worked with a lot of vets. It's tough when you come back home after serving to really get back into civilian life. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Sure. Before I say anything, I always like to make the point that in terms of veterans as a whole, we're very strong. I think that's something that can potentially pose some problems in terms of kind of asking for help and things of that nature. You're trained in the military to really push through pain to get a job done, oftentimes jobs that are extremely difficult. And in the military is unique. I think the culture in the military is very much different than the overall civilian culture. Now, obviously, there's always exceptions, but in terms of kind of general stereotypes, if you think of the military experience, where oftentimes it's an 18-year-old kid, so you have an individual who is leaving behind everything that they knew, everything that was familiar to them. So they leave their family, they leave their hometown. In a sense, they leave their identity. They show up at their boot camp or basic training, and their clothes are taken from them. Their hairstyle is taken from them. They're put in a uniform, and they are given a mission. And throughout your military experience, you have that single-minded focus to where things like service before self, and a sense of purpose and clear instruction on what the objective is. And when you have an environment, oftentimes they're somewhat traumatic. I think that term, and it would describe basic training, where you show up and you're getting screamed at and everything's kind of out of sorts. The bond that you form in the military is extremely unique. From day one, at the first day of basic, you go from zero to best friend in a very short period of time. 60 guys in a room, they've all gone through the same experience. You just bond very quickly. And from there, that ends, and you're off to tech school, and the same thing happens. And then after school, you go to your first duty assignment, or different branches. Obviously, if you're in the Navy, oftentimes you go on a boat. But wherever you go, you move. And when you show up at the new location, every person on that base has gone through that experience. And so the culture is extremely inviting, warm, welcoming. It's very easy to plug in. And oftentimes, I think in the civilian world, it's a little bit different. It's not quite as inviting. It's not quite as a whole, as a general stereotype. And I think, our culture as a whole is getting away from certain practices. No longer are block parties as common as they used to be. And a lot of get-togethers these days, it seems like folks are, the military, again, the guy standing next to you oftentimes is going to potentially have your life in his hands at some point in time. Oftentimes, depending on your job, there are many jobs in which you have to depend on the person next to you, and so there's a trust factor that exists. And I don't want to come across the wrong way, but I do believe that it would be safe to say that oftentimes in the civilian world that's not always the case.
Sure, and what you just said a minute ago, John, is we don't have that sense of community these days. People are more transient, and so I know that you grew up in the Hendersonville area. You're a graduate of Hendersonville High School and entered the Air Force upon graduation. But for decades, you had that sense of community, and now life is more fast paced, and you just don't do things in neighborhoods and church groups and all like you once did. And so let's talk for just a minute and I understand what you're saying, the bond that you build with these men and women that you go through training with and that you serve with, and that's very drastic compared to coming back to civilian life.
Absolutely. And there lies the challenge oftentimes is individuals come back to their hometowns or, they get out and they move to a new location and they need to plug in, especially, you think you have two different groups of people. You have groups of people in whom have had really traumatic experiences while they were in the military. And then you have individuals who just served and had this experience of both a very strong community base and also a very clear mission objective. When you join the military, they teach you how to shine your shoes, press your uniform. They tell you what to do and when to do it and how to do it. When you get out of the military, that's no longer there. And now all of a sudden, the veteran is now expected to be extremely self-aware, to answer questions like, what do I want to do? What am I passionate about? These are oftentimes questions that they were never encouraged to ask when they're in the military. Your job while you're there is not really to be very creative in your thinking process. It's to get a particular job done in a particular way. And when you get out, that just isn't really the case. And so you have this twofold issue where on the one hand, you're lacking the community, which oftentimes it's the security structure. It's the thing in which helps you through life or through experiences. And then on the other hand, you're also facing the challenge of making decisions like, do I want to start my own business? Do I want to go to school? If so, what for? And it's this transition phase that oftentimes can pose a lot of problems as individuals are coming out of the military into the civilian world. And so for our organization, that right there is our kind of focal point. That's the thing in which we're attempting to address. And the horticulture, the farming, the innovative techniques that we're trying to teach, those are all means to an end. Those are tools that are designed to really promote community.
Sure. With us today is John Mahshie. John is the founder of Veterans Healing Farm, which is located up in Hendersonville, North Carolina. For information, you can go to his website, veteranshealingfarm.org, to get information about this wonderful program. So, John, you saw some of the issues. You've experienced some of these issues yourself. So rather than just talking about them, you decided to do something about it, and that's when you founded Veterans Healing Farm. So let's talk quickly. We have about 2 minutes left here today. Let's talk about what you're doing there and why you think it's important and how we can help.
Absolutely. So our mission is to cultivate community. We do that through these different tools. We have three primary components to our organization. The first component is our members garden. We currently have 30 families involved in our community. It consists of about 100 individuals total. Many of the families have children. And so this is a group of people, they are in essence a part of a community farm. So we grow a variety of different crops, and they all partake in harvesting, maintaining, and in really getting together in things like potlucks and camping retreats, all sorts of different activities. The second component is our donation garden. Our donation garden is actually 3 times the size of our members garden, and all of the food we raise in our donation garden actually supports local nonprofit organizations that are serving veterans and also different food pantries in our area. The third component is a workshop in which we're currently in the process of building. It consist of one 40-foot shipping container and one 20-foot shipping container. So these shipping containers have been converted into an off-grid. One is a bunkhouse and one is a kitchen. And the goal with that unit, it's called the Joshua McCardle Community Center, is to create a place in which veterans from all around the country can come out and actually experience training, a 4 to 5 day workshop program in which we'll have the opportunity to teach them all sorts of different subject matters, including growing mushrooms, composting, medicinal herbs, horticulture, many other holistic related topics. And in terms of helping our organization, obviously as a nonprofit, donations are something in which monetary donations would be very helpful. In addition to that, in terms of volunteering, we do have opportunities for groups of people to come out, especially with our donation garden, in terms of harvesting some of the crops that are going to be going to some of the local food banks. And so, those are two areas in which we would love help for individuals that would like to support our organization.
Sure. John Mahshie, thank you again for joining us for a few minutes today. And again, just thank you for what you're doing for the men and women in the Western North Carolina area that have served in our armed forces. And I'm sure this is helpful for you too. I'm sure you get as much from this by doing this, as the men and women who participate. But we appreciate what you're doing. Again, for information on Veterans Healing Farm, just go to the website, veteranshealingfarm.org, or go to our website, conservativetalk945.com, and we'll have a link on there as well. John, thanks for joining us, and we hope to catch up with you again later and just keep up with your progress.
Thank you so very much for having me.